So now this will be a continuation of this whole Steve Ballmer and perhaps the largest cap circumvention in sports history when it's all said and done. Pablo Torre has put on a masterclass where he's slowly luring these billionaires into a spider web in which they can't get out of. As in this segment, we'll not only hear from people who were interviewed by the feds who work for Aspiration, but we'll also get to hear and see a couple of text messages that were revealed as Aspiration struggled to pay Kawhi Leonard even with the first payment. We'll also get to check out a couple of text messages that were exchanged between Aspirational executives as they struggled just to make the first payment to Kawhi. Pablo Torre was also able to obtain a couple receipts of even more payments coming from Steve Ballmer into Aspiration to keep him afloat. The rabbit hole does get deep, but we're going to make this all palatable. For those of you that are watching the video version, there'll be plenty of visuals and timelines to make this all easier to digest. And before we get to the main course, I'm going to start off with Bruce Arthur, a writer for the Toronto Star, as he reveals some of the behind the scenes things that were at play when Kawhi initially hit free agency after winning the championship in Toronto.
So during the playoffs, everyone knew that they were looking at the Clippers, right? Like, and I think I reported at the time, like Uncle Dennis Robertson was heard after games, you know, in the wash after the games where people are standing around the loading dock talking to each other. He was heard talking about targeting the Clippers as Kawhi's next during the playoffs. Like, I think it was during the Philly series. And so once they actually win the title, there was a real question as to whether he would come back. People now assume that it was a fait accompli, and it wasn't. At least the Raptors didn't think so. Up close, they were in constant communication with Kawhi. They knew what they were offering. They were offering a team that just won the title, and Kawhi's people knew and acknowledged that it was the best basketball situation. And by the way, OG Anunoby didn't even play in that playoffs. He was going to come back the next year. They had everyone coming back, and that was a really good team. But the Clippers obviously had been stalking Kawhi for a year. The Raptors knew that. And so things started to move, and Kawhi, the picture started to become clearer. And so at some point in the negotiations, they crossed a deal from Kawhi and Dennis. Oh, this is important. Remember, Bill Simmons at one point said, well, I wonder if Kawhi even knew about this. Kawhi sat in the meetings, listened to Dennis the whole time. Absolutely 100%. He unless he had headphones on, like noise canceling headphones, he was part of those meetings. And so Dennis kind of starts going, well, we'd be interested to see if you could trade for Paul George. I believe the other name in there, because Kawhi was shopping around a little bit at the time. I think Bradley Beal was on that list, is what I reported at the time. He wanted Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy was going to Miami. And so Paul George really became the target. Bradley Beal, I think, was like a real backup. And the Raptors went, oh, I guess we could do that. So they made a call. And the ask at the time was, it wasn't even Masai to Sam Presti. It was lower level stuff. It was Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, 4 or 5 unprotected first round picks, and then you got to match the salary. And the Raptors went like, well, good luck. If you can get that, good luck. And that's interesting. They got that because the Clippers were so desperate. They make the Shea trade. They move all those picks. They move everything. So that was the number one demand, and probably the biggest one of everything. If the Clippers don't make the Paul George deal, I am of the belief to this day that Kawhi comes back. Maybe on a 1+1, maybe on a 1-year deal. And I, to this day, believe the Raptors win the title the next year with Kawhi. But they make the Paul George deal. But the other stuff that they brought up in the meeting was, what else can we get? So they kind of bring up a number, and the number is something like $10 million a year extra. And now the Raptors, Toronto's a very corporate city. There was a giant free agent in hockey in like 2016, Steven Stamkos, a local boy of the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was a free agent. He comes to Toronto. The president of Canadian Tire is in the meeting because because they can do that in the NHL. And they say, you will get all kinds of corporate endorsements in this town. No problem. And so this is the same thing. They go, well, yeah, of course we could. There's all kinds of corporations who would love to line up and talk to you. And this is where it goes sideways. Because Dennis says like, well, okay, but we don't want to do any work. And the Raptors kind of go.
Now keep in mind, with Uncle Dennis saying they don't want to do any work, this was the same sweetener that Pablo Torre revealed in the paperwork that according to the contract with Aspiration, Kawhi did not even have to do anything, and they even had options where he can tweet out something if he wanted to. So this situation sounds very familiar to what ended up playing out with Steve Ballmer in Aspiration.
Well, no, but like you don't have to do a lot of work. You just have to shoot some commercials, make some appearances. Maybe you put something on your Twitter feed, whatever it is. And they go, no, you don't think no, we don't want to do any work. And someone in the Raptors room at that point just goes, fuck. That's what this is. Because up until that point, they're asking for a lot, but you're within the bounds of kind of how the NBA works, right? I will come to you if you trade for this guy. And also, I'm interested in endorsements outside the team. This has been something that's been discussed ever since this story was broken by Pablo, right? Which is that a lot of teams line up their sponsors with their star players. Sure. It works for everyone. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the Raptors kind of go, well, we're out. Like, we can't do that. But the other thing that Dennis asks for, so he's still not done asking. I believe at one point he asked for a house or use of this or use of that, all this stuff. But he asks for a slice of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, two problems here. The Leafs are the biggest sports franchise in Canada, one of the biggest in the world. Like 4 out of every 10 Canadians live in Ontario. 95% of them that are hockey fans are Leafs fans. Like, this is a giant franchise. But also, they're owned by the same company. One company owns the Toronto Raptors and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But Dennis thought that it was he knew he couldn't ask for the Raptors, but he thought he could ask for the Leafs.
My man, Uncle Dennis was trying to get that Knicks Pat Riley deal, where he asked for percentages of ownership, but the Knicks are sort of a corporate franchise. They kind of ran with the MSG networks. It's kind of complicated right there already. They can't divvy out shares without a board approving that.
So, like, it was 2 separate entities. Like, he thought,
he didn't think it would be a conflict of interest if he
it's a completely
owned a
different
share
sport.
of the company. It's a hockey team.
He did not Google. He did not punch it into the Googles before he sat down, right?
Wait, hold on. He didn't realize it was owned by the same company, which is, by the way, for the listeners at home, the name of the company is, Bruce?
Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment owns the Toronto Raptors.
My man, Uncle Dennis had a wish list. He was like, fuck it, I'm just going to start asking for anything.
That's how it works. But so at the Raptors side, I believe it was Larry Tannenbaum, who's a minority owner with the Raptors, had to explain, well, no, sorry, we can't do that because they're owned by the same company. So what do you have in terms of your asks? You got to trade for Paul George. Well, the Raptors wouldn't do that. The Clippers would. Then you ask for a certain amount of money above and beyond the salary cap, but we don't want to work for it. And we want stakes in outside companies that, again, we don't have to pay for, we don't have to work for. It's just extra money.
Now, before we get to the segment, all of this that was just stated is what played out in these aspiration contracts with Kawhi. He didn't have to do any work. He also owned percentages of aspiration. And eventually, when we go deeper into the paperwork, we'll see that he had an opt-out clause for his percentages of stock could actually be cashed out for no cheaper than a certain rate, even if the stocks fall below a certain value. Let's say the company was going to shit and the stocks were valued at $2 a share. He could sell it for no cheaper, let's just say for $20 a share. He had that type of clause in the contract.
And so the Raptors walk away from this and they go, listen, we did our best. There's no way to make this happen. There was no way Kawhi was going to stay under those conditions. And that's the end of the story. The morning he left, there was huge anger, though, in Raptors front office about how this had taken place. Like they were upset about this because this wasn't a free agent negotiation in the way that you're supposed to negotiate for free agents. But Kawhi walks, the pandemic interrupts the next year, the world spins outwards, and on we go, right? And so when Pablo reports this story, I'm looking at it, and I had heard pieces of this, but I couldn't prove any of it because you can't see into where's the money. You gotta have a window into the money, and that's what Pablo got here. It was a window into how exactly it worked. Now, what's interesting is the timeline on that. He doesn't have stuff that's 2019. He has stuff that happened starting in 2021.
And now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes and find out what exactly happened post 2021. By the time Aspiration was due to start making payments to Kawhi, they were scrambling not only to find investors, but they were also scrambling for money, as Steve Ballmer and his college roommate, Dennis Wong, who only owned 1% of the team, was actually wiring Aspiration multiple payments to keep them afloat. Uncle Dennis was definitely knocking down that door trying to get his money, and the members of Aspiration were trying to maintain their great relationship with the Clippers. They knew Uncle Dennis would have to get paid. We're going to find out a lot of shit right here, including from 2019 to 2022, Aspiration reported losses of $772 million. So you guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
I think people are treating this, as Mark Cuban has been treating this, like kind of a true crime podcast. And the fact that there is no smoking definitive piece of paper that says, I'm doing the crimes, I'm doing cap circumvention with a signature on it, it allows people to fill in the blanks. And so it just feels like, frankly, I'm watching people get scammed by the people I'm investigating for scamming. I'm like seeing why they're falling for the thing that they engineered, because they're not listening to the full story that I've reported about why this is in fact a scheme. They're kind of buying and biting the hook.
It's just weird to me, though, in this age of conspiracy, Pablo. I do not see this kind of sports journalism being done by much of anybody in the modern age because people can't afford it. And furthermore, certainly not podcasters. It's super weird for me to see the amount of what feels like proof or circumstantial evidence.
Alleged
yeah,
proof.
but it feels, there's so much documentation that for people to ask you to do more in the way of documentation is weird, because the amount of documentation you have doesn't have a lot of precedent in scandals that I'm used to seeing.
Inside of Aspiration, the $28 million contract with Kawhi's company, KL2 Aspire LLC, was extremely weird from the start. I was told that Aspiration's chief marketing officer at the time, when he first heard about this deal, did not even know who Kawhi Leonard was. Like, that's the sort of dissonance in terms of climate change company going and giving the biggest deal on the market to who? To that guy who was described by people who had the company as dull?
Aspiration co-founder Andre Cherny this week denied that it was a no-show job, correct? Denied that that was any such thing.
Yeah, so this guy who signed the paperwork, yes, the former CEO, he emerged for the first time in public to dispute the reporting. He said, quote, "The claim that the contract with Kawhi Leonard was a no-show contract is false."
Now, once again, for those of you watching the visual version, as you can see right here, October 2022 is when Andre Cherny had actually resigned. Now, as you can see, in July of 2022 is when they made their first payment to Kawhi, which is already a month late because the first payment was due in June. And by September of 2022, the second payment was already due to Kawhi. So Andre Cherny definitely got the fuck out of Dodge because things were getting hot, and there was eventually going to be a third payment due that December.
And then he proceeded to argue that the beliefs provision in the contract, the thing that our friend David Sampson spotlighted for us in part one, in which Kawhi didn't have to do anything if it didn't align with his small b beliefs, Andre Cherny argued, actually, this is totally normal for celebrity endorsements. It's like, Dan, if you're a vegetarian, Andre Cherny was saying, and you got asked to eat meat. Of course. And I suppose in this case, the equivalent would be that Kawhi Leonard is whatever a vegetarian is for someone who doesn't do work. But most crucially, what Andre Cherny said on Twitter was, quote, "In the months of discussion among our executives before signing the sponsorship, I don't remember conversations about the NBA salary cap," end quote. And I just think that anytime someone says, I don't remember, instead of there were no, it's a bit of a red flag for me, just as a person who reads a lot of statements.
Can we believe anything this person is saying? Like, what is the credibility of this person?
The credibility is that Mark Cuban had then tweeted out, "This is the guy to trust. Joe Sandberg, don't trust him. Andre Cherny is co-founder. This is the guy that Cuban says is not going to jail. And so trust him." And so what I did, of course, was I made some calls and I got a joint statement signed on the record by 3 former executives at Aspiration Partners, all of whom directly reported to Andre Cherny at the time that Cherny signed the KL2 Aspire deal. They are the former chief financial officer Roger Avanesian, the former chief legal officer, Mike Shuckero, and the chief technology officer, Eric Anderson. And they write under their own names, among other things, quote, "The Leonard deal was presented to the company as a completed arrangement and executed by Mr. Cherney, despite significant objections from members of the senior management team. It did not reflect any strategy previously communicated to us, nor was it reviewed through Aspiration's investment committee process. The team expressed concerns at the time regarding the high cost of the agreement and its lack of alignment of Aspiration's brand and business strategy. In our judgment, the Leonard deal was not in the company's best interest. It was strategically difficult to justify then, and it remains so today." End quote. So when I say the story is developing, Dan, people are now watching and saying, I've had enough from the people who are saying this reporting is bullshit.
Oh, and you've got the names. Like, that's not anonymous. You're not even doing these people. They're providing you the documentation that's saying, no, we sign off on Pablo Torre's reporting.
What the other Cuban urged me to investigate relates directly to this, right? So his whole thing was, why haven't you looked into how the money was flowing into the contract?
Why haven't you taken the time, Pablo? The time. Why haven't you taken more time to talk to more people as Cuban just wanders around gasbagging to Kendrick Perkins?
I unfortunately took that bait and I proceeded to talk to more people. I proceeded to return, in fact, to anonymous source number one, who had worked inside of Aspiration's finance department, who has fully cooperated with the federal investigation that led to the arrest of Joe Sandberg, even though source number one is also someone that Mark Cuban doesn't really appear to trust. So I hesitate, source number one, to drag you into my ongoing Twitter beef with Mark Cuban, but I do just want to read something that he wrote effectively about you and a growing number of your colleagues who have been daring to speak to me, because here's what he says. Quote, "For all the information you have, why didn't any of the people you have talked to while they worked there uncover the fraud? Question mark.
Who's to say that they didn't?"
Right.
Yeah, so around March or April of 2022, it was the Seattle fish market. It wasn't just smelling fishy. You couldn't escape it. And at that rate, many people within the finance department started to raise alarms and actually address with executive leadership the problems that they were seeing. To go so far as to say that a firm was hired in order to conduct an external investigation on the fishiness that was taking place within Aspiration in regards to revenue, in regards to accounts receivable, in regards to accounts payable, the entire bucket that had occurred within 90 days of signing $300 million was already fishy enough for many of my old colleagues to go to executive leadership and raise the alarms.
What was the shelf life like for an Aspiration finance officer?
Shorter than milk, which is abnormal. I mean, put into context where this company is said to be going, and they don't even have a full-time CFO. They don't even have a full-time controller.
Damn. That is a red flag right there. Those are some of the highest positions in the Department of Finance. Like, that's crazy. No CFO or controller. God knows who's signing off on some of these payments, or just who's even looking at the financials at that point.
A 2-point-something billion unicorn hadn't hired a full-time controller.
Correct. They could not hire a full-time controller, and they could not hire a full-time CFO after Roger Avanesian stepped down.
And no one dumb enough at those high positions are going to take those jobs head on. They would even accept a job under those type of circumstances, even looking at the financials.
One of the executives, by the way, who signed under his own name that statement, which we referred to earlier, in which he rebuked the characterizations of Andre Cherney, the co-founder and CEO of the company. But I digress. He stepped down, noticing that something was not right here.
Right. Many of my colleagues actually quit due to their disappointment and discouragement and the response of the executive leadership team as a result of external investigations into the concerns that they raised. So I think it's a vast mischaracterization on the team itself to say that we didn't uncover anything, which goes to show why many people on the finance team left as quickly as they got there.
But the thing about what source number one is telling us is pretty eye-opening for people who are just kind of paying attention. Because remember, Aspiration raises like $300 million in fall 2021, Dan. What source number one is saying is that all that shit is gone. It's gone so quickly. It's gone, in fact, before Kawhi Leonard ever got paid.
Yeah, so Ballmer himself put in $50 million in September of 2021 as a part of an ongoing fundraise effort that eventually brought in Oak Tree Capital Management and an additional 250 or so. And as quickly as it's wired in, it's committed elsewhere. There were extensive legal fees, professional services fees, marketing contracts, sponsorships and endorsements, things that were promised that had to be paid. So as quickly as those funds come in, they're out the door.
It's actually just spent on the other stuff that Aspiration, under the direction of Joe Sandberg, the co-founder, has been spending.
Joe Sandberg and Andre Tierney.
So Ballmer's putting in money that's not going to Kawhi Leonard.
Yes, so they are spending it on all sorts of things. They have a giant marketing budget. They have a professional services budget. They're just spending money flagrantly. And so the question then, of course, is like, so to Mark Cuban's point, how does Kawhi Leonard then get paid if you're telling us that they're burning cash as soon as they get it? And I need to acknowledge something else, Dan, because Mark Cuban tweeted another thing that is worthy of inclusion in our discussion. And I have not brought this up yet in any of the episodes we've done to date. And so, Dan, could you just read Mark Cuban's tweet? You were not on Twitter, you missed this. But on Friday, he said this.
While Pablo is focusing on the $2 million and $50 million from Wong Ballmer, he didn't really get into the millions of dollars in carbon credits that were purchased by the Clips and the arena. I bring this up because it would have been a lot easier and a lot safer if he was trying to circumvent the CBA to just buy more carbon credits. They were almost all margin, as Pablo correctly pointed out, so they would have created the cash immediately to pay KL2.
And so what Mark Cuban is saying there does actually make a ton of sense, I must admit, because Aspiration, for those not familiar, was functioning as a broker for carbon credits at this point in their company's history. Anybody who has been following the life cycle of the apple tree that proudly stands still outside of Intuit Dome at the end of our first episode, they know this. Carbon credits are there to offset the real-life emissions of businesses like Meta and celebrities, by the way, like Drake, and other clients of Aspiration, such as the Clippers, as Steve Ballmer explained himself, reportedly. And so that is the margin that Mark Cuban is referring to in his tweet. Just get more carbon credits. All that margin is what you'll use to pay Kawhi Leonard. And so the piece of paper, Dan, that I would like you to turn over, which nobody else has reported yet, has something that I need you to read out loud. Actually, just describe what you see at the top of the page.
At the top of the page, I see the Clippers logo, and it says East West Bank, and it says payment to Aspiration Sustainable Impact Services, LLC. Please allow this letter to confirm approval by LA Clippers, LLC, of a withdrawal of $20,961,382 from escrow account number blank. The withdrawn amount will be used to fund the following carbon projects. June 14th, 2022.
June 14th, 2022 is when this letter is sent. This letter that you just read says that they're withdrawing $21 million to fund carbon projects. It names a reforestation project, some nature-based credits, and then it is signed at the bottom, Dan, for the record here, by who?
Is that the chief financial officer?
That is the chief financial officer of the Clippers. On June 14th, 2022, Aspiration is informed that it is receiving $21 million in this letter you're holding from the LA Clippers, signed by the CFO. And this, I'm told, was enough to not only pay Kawhi Leonard, obviously, it was enough to hit its fundraising target. It was enough to keep the company afloat 2 weeks, Dan, before Kawhi's initial no-show payment was due on June 30th, 2022. And so, according to two sources that I've spoke to who had direct familiarity with this $21 million carbon credit deal with the Clippers, it was agreed to and put into motion very promptly. I am told that Steve Ballmer and the Clippers, their executive team, had heard Aspiration's sales pitch for the $21 million purchase just, quote, a couple weeks before the June 14th, 2022 letter came in as you're holding it in your hands. And my sources found this very memorable for a contract of that size in particular, because it's an enormous deal. And to quote one of them, The money came in quickly. They didn't sit on it or anything. And so instead of us connecting the dots here, I'd like to ask source number 2, former senior executive in Aspiration's finance department, to come to the stage and explain what might be the missing piece here.
So what did you think, source number 2, when you saw what Mark Cuban had been tweeting about how if you were to circumvent the salary cap and you were a carbon credits company, you would do this?
They did that. I mean, literally, he described one of the few ways that the Clippers and Ballmer got money into Aspiration. He literally described exactly what they did. So, I mean, he's right. That he's completely correct. That would be one of the avenues that you would use to circumvent the cap.
I don't know what Mark Cuban wants in terms of a paper trail, but something with the Clippers logo signed off by the CFO of the company, like that's pretty strong documentation.
In the way that he literally said it would have happened if this was cap circumvention, in a way that I'd never said before in public.
Once again, Pablo Torre is putting on a masterclass on how to dog walk some of these billionaires into a fucking spiderweb that they cannot get out of.
But the thing about the Intuit Dome at this time, as they're buying carbon credits for this project, is that it wasn't open yet. The Intuit Dome wouldn't be open until August 2024. And so the whole rush of like, we gotta get these $20 million in carbon credits in because we're the building didn't exist.
I prefer the idea that the rush should be because the world is burning and Earth is going to be destroyed, but that's not the rush.
The rush is Uncle Dennis wanting his fucking money. Check out the timeline of the payment schedule. Kawhi is owed 3 payments a year. In the beginning of June, the beginning of September, and at the end of the year in December.
It's the Uncle Dennis is on the phone and we're late with our payments, allegedly.
And so to recap, in that context, we have millions more dollars coming into just broke-ass Aspiration at this point from people affiliated clearly with actual quote-unquote Team Ballmer, almost exactly, again, when Kawhi Leonard contractually needed to get paid by Aspiration. And it happened around, Kawhi's slightly late first payment in mid-2022, with the Clippers paid $21 million for those carbon offsets. And it happened again around Kawhi's extremely late second payment in late 2022, when the company had already gone into default, and the investment firm for the Clippers' one and only co-owner Dennis Wong, aka Steve Ballmer's college roommate, wired in personally $2 million, his first ever investment in the company. And so I'm just saying, you might notice a bit of a cycle repeating itself and revealing itself here, because according to my sources, what happens here is that it is paramount. It is so important.
It was something that had to be done, and it was crucial to our relationships with Ballmer and the Clippers.
To Aspiration's relationship to Steve Ballmer, that Kawhi Leonard gets paid. Board man must get paid on time for doing nothing. But Ballmer also, in this same cycle, hypothetically, he needed to keep the cardinal sin of this NBA scheme completely secret. Aspiration co-founder Joe Sandberg has declined to comment through an attorney. But what Sandberg appeared to need over and over again, of course, was more money. And what my reporting indicates is that it can still be true that through KL2 Aspire LLC and this potential cap circumvention scheme involving Steve Ballmer, Joe Sandberg realized he had a bit of leverage here in the power dynamic with the richest owner in sports who had lots and lots and lots of money to spend. Dan, I just feel like I'm living inside of the game Clue, where we have the Clippers CFO with the $21 million carbon credit deal in the conservatory, and we have Dennis Wong with the $1.99 million wire transfer in, it's called the billiard room. Those would be, in this cap circumvention mystery, the accusations for a payment 1, for a payment 2, which brings us finally to 2023, and right back to Mr. Ballmer. Ballmer's money, and Kawhi Leonard was due another quarterly payment of $1.75 million in March 2023. Before we get to that point in time, that very crucial point in the timeline, you should have now another piece of paper in front of you. Can you just read what that one in your hands now says across the top?
It says right on it, confidential. confidential Joseph Sandberg, Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of New York, videotape deposition of Joseph Sandberg, Tuesday, October 16th, 2024.
But we're going to have to rewind what was happening in 2023 because Joe Sandberg and other members of Aspiration, they were looking to get investment and they were getting rejected from multiple firms. They were trying to go public. And I guess they looked at their financials and like, hey, this shit is not adding up. So things were already rocky back then. In December 2022, after paying Kawhi $1.7 million, they were supposed to merge with a public company into private financial partners. So they tried to merge with another company in order to do so, listing their shares at $10 a piece, and they still couldn't get anyone to buy in. So things were in flux way before this deposition.
So in October of 2024, it turns out Aspiration co-founder Joseph Sandberg, who would ultimately be indicted for wire fraud, was being personally sued by a direct lending fund named Clover Private Credit and the hedge fund that managed it, known as UBS O'Connor. And we do not, and I hate this part, we do not have the videotape of Sandberg's deposition. I would hit play on it so quickly. But thanks to the filings in this case, the case has been settled, by the way, with a judgment against Joe Sandberg and his affiliates of more than $278 million. What I have is the transcript. And so I just need to ask you, Dan, to do a bit of a table read with me. And in this deposition, which took place again, October 16th, 2024 in New York, New York, you will be playing the role of Joseph Sandberg, the co-founder of Aspiration, and I will be playing the role of the attorney asking him questions. Aspiration very publicly and promptly had a number of celebrity investors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Including Drake, the rapper?
Yes.
Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yes.
Steve Ballmer?
Yes.
Former CEO of Microsoft, owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, correct?
That's correct.
In fact, at one point, Aspiration had a deal with the Clippers, did they not?
I assert my Fifth Amendment rights.
Have you met Leonardo DiCaprio?
No.
Have you met Drake?
No.
Have you met Steve Ballmer?
Yes.
Were you involved in securing their investment in Aspiration?
I assert my Fifth Amendment rights.
But when he says repeatedly, I assert my Fifth Amendment rights, I just need to let everybody know that I did this same exercise with source number 2.
Well, I think that tells you everything you need to know about whether Joe thought that the deal he had with the Clippers was potentially illicit.
And so again, Dan, Joe Sandberg had declined to comment through his attorney. But there was another exchange in the deposition that we need to read here. And for this part, I need to call upon the theatrical talents of Roy Bellamy. Roy, are you there?
Yes, sir. I am playing Mr. Burstein.
That's right. Mr. Burstein, Joe Sandberg's lawyer, who plays a key role in this part of the play. Did you manage to get any new investors into Aspiration at the end of 2022 and the start of 2023?
Yes.
Who?
Oh, Steve Ballmer?
Don't look at me.
Oh, I wasn't looking at you to answer. Sorry. Let's see. Steve Ballmer, Dennis Wong versus his entity. I can't recall the name of his entity.
And scene. The thing about this deposition transcript, which I love, beyond the fact that Joe Sandberg's attorney is on the record telling him as he's pondering what he should say about Steve Ballmer.
Don't look at me.
Don't look at me. Either way you pronounce it, it's just pretty funny. But that part, the whole actual question and answer hidden there is a timeline, right? It brings us back to December 2022. He's talking about, did you raise money at the end of 2022 and the start of 2023? And so this brings us back to when Dennis Wong, again, put in $2 million into Aspiration. And I just need to reiterate here that the one and only new investor coming into Aspiration during this round of fundraising was Dennis Wong, who has not responded to multiple requests for comment about his investment. But this was especially glaring because one reason I suspect Joe Sandberg referred to this round of fundraising as vigorous, as you performed it, was because everybody else that he asked outside pretty much kept saying no. In the court documents in the Clover case, what I proceeded to find out was that Sandberg contacted at least 19 outside investment firms from fall 2022 to spring 2023. And all of them, Dan, all of them turned Aspiration down.
As they should, because Aspiration by December 1st of 2022 did their first round of layoffs, and just literally a week later, they laid off 100 more employees.
But Steve Ballmer, as Joe Sandberg, as you read in that deposition, did not. Which is now strange for another reason. Because you may recall, Dan, that the comment the Clippers gave Pablo Torre finds out before episode 1 was published was kind of bold. If you could read that for us right now, just remind us what they said.
The team ended its relationship with Aspiration years ago during the 2022-2023 season when Aspiration defaulted on its obligations. Neither the Clippers nor Mr. Ballmer was aware of any improper activity by Aspiration or its co-founder until after the government instituted its investigation. The team and Mr. Ballmer stand ready to assist law enforcement in any way they can.
Right. So let's now line up the timeline. So March 9th, 2023, when Steve Ballmer put in $10 million through his personal LLC, first reported by The Athletic. In the NBA context, there were only 14 games left in the Clippers' 2022-23 regular season, okay? So Steve Ballmer, at that point, did the opposite of end his own personal relationship with Aspiration. He put in $10 million. And look, that, of course, combined with the initial $50 million, takes us to $60 million. And this, according to 9 sources with direct knowledge of the deal, as well as court filings. In other words, Dan, the opposite happened from what the Clippers statement tried to convey before they knew we had mountains of documents.
And this is the second time this happened, because initially, before Pablo Torre had first put out this report, just in general, he sent out for a statement on the Clippers to respond to his initial findings. They stated that any claims that the Clippers committed cap circumvention were truly false. And by the time Pablo Torre made this story public, the claims went from quote-unquote false to absurd, as reported from Shams, Ramona Shelburne, and others.
It's going to be hard for them to wiggle around some of this documentation. I don't know how much more NBA is going to do in the way of investigating beyond this, but it seems like every time you investigate a little more of this, more money starts appearing, because we started at a $7 million a year arrangement, and it seems like there is more and more money happening here.
Yep, there's a lot of payments the Clippers are making, including Steve Ballmer, Dennis Wong. I mean, at some point, it's going to balloon past $100 million. And when it's all said and done, don't be shocked if the number is over $500 million.
It's now doubling what your initial reporting is, more than doubling your initial reporting.
Aspiration keeps on raising money from quote-unquote Team Ballmer along the direct point in the timeline at which Kawhi Leonard is due his quarterly payments. Again, we saw it with payment 1, we saw it with payment 2, now we see it in March 2023. And my second source, again, the former finance executive high up inside Aspiration, observed something even more eye-opening given personal context.
Come March 23, I was still with the firm, even though a lot of executives had left. You know, majority of them were let go. Some of them left because they realized that there were some untoward activities taking place at the board level. Certainly, we, inside of Aspiration, knew that federal agencies were starting to look into Aspiration.
And also in March of 2023, Aspiration did another round of layoffs. Another 180 employees were let go.
And in fact, Forbes published an article in early March about the fact that there's a new CEO.
I'm just looking at the Forbes headline, and the headline from March 6th, 2023 was, quote, "A floundering fintech's risky reboot."
Yeah, yes.
Which is to say that at this point, like, people are noticing that things are not going close to good at Aspiration.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at the California State Database now. This is for the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, the WARN Act, in which you got to disclose in advance ahead of a mass layoff. And when I look at the WARN report on March 24th, 2023, Aspiration laid off permanently, it says, another 180 employees.
Yeah, that's when it really went bare bones.
We were constantly in awe and it's shocked that Ballmer would invest in the company again. And I have text messages between myself and colleagues where we are wondering why Ballmer put money in, to the extent where, how do you want me to read these?
I'd like you to show it to me, and then I'd like you to just read out both sides of that conversation so we could understand it for the audio audience.
Okay. So this is a text message I got from a colleague in all caps. Ballmer put money in, ? To which I responded, it's just honestly so insane. This whole thing is just so insane.
So in other words, smelled fishy at the time.
Seattle Fish Market.
But they're throwing fish at people and people are loving it. According to court documents in the aforementioned Clover lawsuit, which we've been digging into here, Aspiration reported, Dan, these are the net losses for the company between 2019 and 2022. Losses of $772.5 million. Okay? So as we just get a sense of what was obvious inside the company, and in fact, because of the Forbes article outside the company before Ballmer decided I'm back in for 10, we should point out here that there's another glaring revelation in these documents, which is that in December 2022, this is less than a week after Kawhi Leonard got paid the $1.75 million, the public company Aspiration was supposed to merge with and therefore deliver this massive windfall to its investors, including Steve Ballmer, who was trying to profit off of his investment in Aspiration. This company, this public company, held a special meeting. The public company's name is Interprivate 3 Financial Partners, and according to court documents, 90% of Interprivate's shareholders effectively bailed on the premise of Aspiration. They redeemed their shares at roughly $10.10 per share, tanking the company, hollowing out the entire financial proposition of it. And it helped explain, by the way, why on the outside, they couldn't get anybody else to put in money. But on March 9th, 2023, about 18 months after Ballmer put in $50 million at $11 per share, $11 per share was his original investment. That was the share price. The owner of the Clippers didn't just go back for more.
Ballmer invested $10 million more at a $23 share price.
That's crazy. At $23 a share when the shares were only valuated at $10? Yeah, this is a cap circumvention at its finest, man. My man Ballmer is trying to keep that company alive to at least make the final payments to Kawhi.
Just over $23. So more than double what he invested in as a share price in 2021 when the company was actually publicly in a good financial state. Even if you were to believe that there was no diligence done, March 2023, not only was this publicly known and it was all over the media and all that, we had to give disclosures as part of that investment round. And in those disclosures, the actual financial state of the company at that point were disclosed. So that should tell you a lot.
This is lunacy. It really is. I'm trying to think of what is the item here that is most damning. The dollar amounts, obviously, but we've also now got another Clipper official inserted in the middle of these transactions, and he happens to be their chief financial officer.
I mean, what Steve Ballmer, Dan, as you try to power rank, how is this escapable? What Steve Ballmer has admitted on ESPN is that he, or at least his staff, reviewed what he called, quote, primarily fraudulent financials. Even though, of course, we say that there are disclosures that we have vetted that indicate in so many key ways, truly detailed ways, how the company was obviously
Pablo, you're not going to let them get away with the complicated stuff, are you?
I mean, I want to make it simple, actually. Let's just recap it. September 2021 to March 2023,
quote unquote Team Ballmer, meaning Steve Ballmer, the governor of the Clippers, Dennis Wong, the alternate governor of the Clippers, the CFO of the Clippers, and also the Clippers themselves via the letterhead with these weird carbon credits, they proceed to give a grand total of $118 million to Aspiration in 18 months. Each new payment, I would argue, less defensible than the last.
If you notice, a lot of the dates of the payments that the Clippers have made follow suit with the dates that Aspiration owed Kawhi his payments.
And so, weeks after Steve Ballmer's March 2023 investment, I am told, after the round of fundraising is completed, this is the spring of 2023, another thing worth noting here is that that's about when federal agencies start interviewing dozens of Aspiration employees, just 2 of which, by the way, you've already heard from in this episode today. In fact, March 2023 happens to be when the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the federal agency, had opened its investigation into Aspiration's carbon credit business, I am told, which had been a real source of frustration for the Aspiration employees who actually got into this whole business to, help the planet. And so there's a lot of complicated stuff here. There's also a lot of simple. And to me, the binary that Mark Cuban posed to us, are you Team Ballmer, or as I called it, Team Bricks, the bricks are bigger than I thought.
Yeah, I've got a text here from an NBA owner, and it says some of how it is the mood has changed since that Board of Governors meetings where Ballmer was running around and telling everybody he'd been conned. One of the things this owner says is the difference between this and prior situations is that Ballmer is highly respected. He has done a great job as audit committee chair. The impression from the Board of Governors meeting was that most owners hoped he didn't do it, but these last pieces of information are huge.
And there's nothing they can really do. That's the elephant in the room. Steve Ballmer has enough money to buy almost half the NBA, and he's increased the valuations where even the Charlotte Hornets are selling for $4 billion. So he has been good business for the league, and he's really a look behind the curtain of how some of the tech oligarchs are operating behind the scenes. Ballmer has been an NBA owner for about a decade now, and it's clearly obvious he does not give a fuck about the rules. Once again, if you add up all the money that was put into Aspiration, it's hovering around $1 billion.
You've got other details involving Clippers by name. It's not just Ballmer. You've got paperwork here that is awfully damning here attached to people in important roles. I don't know how the Clippers are going to be able to slither around some of this.
So it is what it is. Quite interesting times for the NBA. The valuations of these teams are going up and up. And right now the price point is so high that they're slowly wheeling in private equity in order to offset the fact that there's so few individuals who can buy these teams. And with these new class of billionaires coming into the league, they have aspirations, quote unquote. They do have aspirations beyond owning these NBA teams. They're using it as a vehicle for major real estate portfolios. Steve Ballmer, when you really look at it, he talks about, oh, Larry O.B., but at the end of the day, he secured the Clippers and purchased the land in downtown LA over there in Inglewood. Not only he owns the land, but he also owns the arena. That is a major real estate play that he did not have in his portfolio, even as a tech guy. And for the Dallas Mavericks, the Adelson family, they have ambitions way beyond the Mavericks. When it's all said and done, they want to build a brand new arena, followed by commercial real estate, as well as a casino, forming almost like a resort-like atmosphere around that arena. It's going to be restaurants, fine dining, shopping, shit, who knows, even a hotel where fans can fly in from all over the world as the NBA globalizes, and they come in to see the Dallas Mavericks, and then they walk into the arena, and at the same time, they could hit up the slot machines. This is what it's all about. But we'll see how it plays out. You guys definitely hit up the playlist in the description below. We got more NBA true stories just like this. And until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.